Hello, everybody. Happy Thriving Thursday. It's so good to be back. The week has flown by. I hope that you have had a phenomenal week. If you're joining me live or you're listening to the recording later on, I thank you for being here with me. Drop me a note. I would love to give you a shout out if you're here with me. I'm Carla. I'm a life and career coach and a full-time RV nomad. And on Thursdays, I broadcast from wherever a little 84 square foot home takes us, or home on wheels, sharing stories from the road and reflections for better living and more career fulfillment. And today I am broadcasting from the beautiful hill country of Texas. And I am inside because it's kind of loud outside. There's a little bit of construction nearby. I was going to take you out with me, but it'll just have to be next time. But I do want to tell you about this part of the country that we're in, and particularly an experience that my husband and I had last night. So we had what I would consider a pretty magical experience in a little nearby town called Bandera, which is the self-proclaimed cowboy capital of the world. And, we went to this outdoor bar. It was an outdoor patio. And we learned through a local that we met that on Wednesday nights, you can bring your own steak. It's bring your own steak night, BYOS night, which means that you can bring your own steak or whatever meat. And the venue provides fire pits and all the fixins, as they say, the sides, the spices, all that. Um, and when we arrived to this music venue last night, it's a music venue too. I just felt this warmth and this just pure happiness for being there. It was a really cool place. There were patio lights all over the place. Um, there was a band playing old time country music. Couples were dancing on the dance floor, wearing their hats and cowboy and cowgirl boots, and everybody was just having a really good time. You could just tell people were really enjoying themselves. And my husband and I also were having a really good time. And the food was amazing, and the environment, and just experiencing this small town, Texas, and really experiencing the Texas culture was a wonderful experience. And I have to say that appreciating Texan culture both warms my heart and it also baffles me. And here's why. 13 years ago, when I was going to college in New York, I told my best friend, who was from Texas, that I could never live in Texas. I just could never see myself living in Texas. Like, he would tell me about it, and I was like, yeah, no, that's not for me. I'm not going to live there. This whole cowboy thing, like, it's just not for me. And I really had this idea that Texas was the Wild West, that it was like the movies that I'd seen when I was little, and that it was not a place where I could ever see myself building a proper career, let alone a family. No way. And politically, I was like, I'm never going to fit in. And it's obviously too hot there, too much traffic. I had all these different excuses. And well, after that very passionate declaration 13 years ago, saying that I would never move to Texas, well, I followed my then boyfriend, now husband, to Texas because he was going to go to graduate school here. And I actually proceeded to build a fantastic career. And I lived in Austin, I lived in Dallas, I worked in consulting, and I just, made some wonderful friends. And it has been a really, truly amazing life living here in Texas, at least before I moved into an RV. So, with all its imperfections, I'm realizing now that I'm back, I'm exploring Texas as an RV nomad, how much I really love this state. And last night, my husband and I were dancing along with the cowboys and cowgirls, and we completely stood out. We were like sore thumbs sticking out. We weren't wearing the right clothing. We couldn't two-step to save our lives. And I still loved every single minute of it. And it's sad to think that I almost missed out on this experience and the career that I built and the life that we've been able to build here in Texas, because one day, for no really good reason at all, I said no. I thought that I could never move here. So my question to you is, how many times have you told yourself that you would never do something? No way, I could never do that, especially when you don't have enough information to know that is, that no is the right answer. And of course, it's okay to say never or to say no to things that are legitimately dangerous. Of course, right? Like, judgment is important. Good judgment is important. But I find through my experience, as well as through through witnessing with my clients that I support that we often say no out of fear. And this fear is created by assumptions that we make. Hello, Bob. Good to see you. Thanks for stopping in. Um, when I told my friend in college 13 years ago that I was never going to move to Texas, I'd only visited Texas as a little girl, maybe once or twice. I certainly had no idea what it would be like to live in Texas as an adult. I had no idea what career opportunities were there. I did not have real information in my hand to make that decision back then. I made that decision back then based on the only thing that was available to me, which were my assumptions. So our assumptions are basically our judgments. They're not truth or facts. Assumptions are created in our minds, typically based on past experiences or something in our past that has informed our ideas or our judgments about something. For me, I had watched these movies when I was little, and I thought that Texas was this hillbilly country or Wild West when, that's in the movies. That was not at all the reality. And the problem with assumptions is that they are one of the biggest inner blockers that stand in our way towards experiencing life fully, right? We say no before we even know. It could also be a lack of information, as Bob says, but why do we say no? Why do we not say, okay, well, let me find out, let me get some evidence, and instead we say no. I've had many conversations with people like, I had this project at work that's come up, and I said I'm going to say no because the last project was really difficult, and this next project is going to be even harder. Right? You don't yet know. You don't have information. So information is really good to have, but we don't always have that information. So by saying no, what we're doing is we're keeping ourselves safe. Sure. But what we're also doing is we're failing before we even try. We don't want to be disappointed in whatever possibility is in front of us down the road. So it's just safer to maybe be disappointed now, just kind of get it over with. Just say no, keep ourselves safe. But imagine if you could open yourself up to possibilities when you don't have information necessarily, and really give yourself an opportunity to have new and exciting and maybe even scary things, different experiences without letting your assumptions stand in the way. Imagine if that you had an opportunity to visit a new country, and of course post COVID, right? And imagine that this country was just very different to where you grew up, and you just were like, I don't know, I don't want to go there because it's going to be so different and I'm just going to be very uncomfortable, so I might as well say no. It's safer for me to say no to that opportunity. But what if instead you challenge your assumptions about the reality about this country, and you thought, okay, maybe I can get information, maybe I can challenge my assumptions, and you said yes, and think about all the wonderful experiences that you could have. Maybe you learn a lot about yourself on that trip, or learn a lot about humanity, about our world. Or at work, back to that example on projects, this was a real conversation that I had. Imagine if you had a project like the person that I was speaking to that came to you, that was handed to you, that was presented to you as a really good opportunity, and you were like, no, not for me. I'm not going to do it. And it's one thing to do it because you have real information that this is not the right thing for you. That's fine. But it's another to say no because you are making the decision based on assumptions from the past, based out of fear. And what if this project was where you learned about different skills that you're really good at, or tasks that you really enjoy doing? Or what if you met the love of your life on this project? I don't know. Anything could happen, right? What a missed opportunity if you didn't challenge those assumptions and possibly give this a try. So how do we challenge assumptions, especially when we don't have information? To Bob's point, I'm going to share with you 3 methods that I use with clients, and I use myself, or I try to use myself, just to make sure that when you're saying no, you're not saying no out of fear, or you're not saying no because you're making judgments that are based on assumptions, right? Don't say no just because you don't know. So my first tip is when you have an opportunity presented to you, for example, a new role at work, and you find yourself immediately like, ugh, like, no, no way, I'm not doing this. Allow yourself to just sit with that no for a few seconds and think about what might be 10% of this opportunity that I do like. Just 10%. And this comes from a training that I'm currently going through around this concept called positive intelligence, which I'm learning so much from and I'm enjoying very much. And the trainer there talks about how when we're presented with a new idea, our brains immediately hone in on the things that we don't like. We immediately judge the idea, especially if it's an idea that just is not what we would have come up with, right? It's very easy for us to just focus on the things that we don't like. But this person argues the reality is that every idea, not every idea is a great idea, 100%, but there's at least 10% in most ideas that we can learn from and that we can take and then build upon to create an even better idea. So at least 10% of what is being presented to you has merit. And by opening ourselves up to consider that 10%, we actually can build up on an idea. We can say, yes, I like what I like about this idea is maybe this one thing only, but maybe there's more than I can add to this in order to make it an even better idea. So just, before you say a complete no, look for the 10% that you do like. What is that 10% that does appeal to you? And let's say that you are finding that, that 10% of an idea, and I'm going to move into the second tip that kind of builds on that first one. But say you still have these blockers, right? You're like, okay, I like this 10%, but no, I still feel like no, this situation happened in the past for me, and therefore it's going to happen again. And that is a very common reaction to assumptions, is thinking that because something happened in the past, that it's going to happen again. That is the only proof that we have, right? That's the only evidence that we have in hand. And so it's natural, it's perfectly normal to say, that's my evidence, therefore it must be true now. But it's not true now. What I can suggest to you is to simply ask yourself, why does it have to be true? Just simply ask why. So say, for example, that you or someone is going on job interviews, right? And this person doesn't get the job. This person, every time that they go on an interview, they're not getting the job. It would be easy to think, well, I have another interview coming up, but I haven't gotten any of the jobs that I've applied for and interviewed for before. What would be different about this one that's coming up? I haven't gotten any of the other ones, so why would I get the next one? And that's not necessarily the case, right? Why does it have to be true that just because you didn't get the past jobs, you're not going to get the next one? It doesn't have to be true. When you challenge assumptions like that, assumptions that are purely based on the past, what happens is that you change your energy. And the reality is that you are no longer the person that you were in the past, right? You have gained through all those experiences many new insights, a lot more confidence, a lot more experience. So yes, you're actually a different person going into the next interview than you were before. So the situation at hand now is very different from the past. So actually, it doesn't have to be like it was in the past, right? The present is now, the past is done. It's not the reality now. So my third tip is to look for evidence to challenge your assumptions. But when I say look for evidence, I don't mean to look for evidence that proves your assumptions to be right. I think we often say, well, like the past, right? You say, I'm challenging my assumptions because I know this to be true. I don't know if you've ever gone through this experiment where you don't notice, you're driving and you don't notice a particular type of car, but then you have a conversation with someone about a particular brand of car. And next time you get on the road, it's like that car is everywhere. You see that car everywhere. And that is how our thoughts are. Once you plant a conscious thought, then your mind is looking for that. So it's the same thing. If you are saying, these assumptions are true, and because I didn't get the job before, I'm not going to get the job now. You're going to be looking for evidence to prove that you're not going to get the job. And guess what? You're not going to get the job because your energy, you're not going to be showing up fully when you go on your next interview. But if you can start to look for evidence of what is right, evidence in the direction of yes instead of in the direction of no, then you will find that evidence too. So for example, this woman that goes on an interview, um, you know, she can choose to look for the evidence in the direction of no by looking at all the past examples of how she didn't get the job, or she can look for evidence in the direction of yes, like what I mentioned before. For example, she is learning a lot about herself in these different interviews. And every time she has an interview, she gets feedback from the interviewer, perhaps, that has given her new information in order to show up differently. And even when doors close, that can be evidence of a yes. So maybe those jobs were not the right jobs for her. And instead of saying that is an evidence that the no, I'm not going to get the job, you can say that is evidence that I simply have not found the right job yet, that the right job for me is right around the corner. So I invite you to give these 3 tips a shot. Next time you feel that you need to say no to something, especially when you don't have enough information, be aware of and challenge your assumptions by first find that 10% that you do like about the idea. Is that 10% something that you're willing to build on and to expand on? The second thing is question whether just because something was true in the past, whether it has to be true now. Probably not, right? That is merely a limiting thought. Nothing from the past has to be true now or in the future. And number 3, look for evidence to challenge your assumptions, but choose to find evidence in the direction of yes, in the direction of disproving your assumptions, not just in the direction of proving your assumptions to be right. All right? I hope that makes sense. How does one handle stress around fear? Well, I think that it goes down to beliefs. Our beliefs are what create our stress. When you have a thought, you are generating emotions that are creating the emotion of stress, that are then creating it's almost like a cycle. When you have a belief about something, like I'm not going to get the job, that belief turns into a feeling of stress, a feeling of incompetence maybe, or lack of control, which then leads to showing up maybe really nervous in your interview and not answering questions in the way that you really wish you would have said, which then fuels again the belief of I can't do this. I'm not going to get the job. But if you switch your belief, if you try out new beliefs, you can change that emotion that follows. You can say, hey, those last interviews really taught me something new. I am much more prepared this time. Think about how different it feels to say that, right? It feels like, oh, you feel empowered, you feel confident, you feel ready. So then you show up in the next interview, in the next action that you're taking with a lot less stress. So I hope that helps, Bob. Thank you so much for your question. I hope that this was helpful. This is something that I am certainly always working through and always working with my clients on. It's a perfectly normal thing to rely on our assumptions, but I want to share with you that your assumptions don't have to mean that you have to say no to something. I'm so glad that I said yes to Texas, right? Like I gained so much in my life by ultimately saying yes. And the way that I challenged those assumptions was by actually visiting Texas. I created some evidence, of why Texas was not so bad. So I wish you a wonderful, happy thriving Thursday. And thank you so much for joining me today. I will catch you next week. Have a fantastic rest of your day. See you soon. Bye.